All right, so welcome to another deep dive, and today we're really going deep
Oh, yeah.
to some criminal psychology,
Yeah,
and we're doing it through the lens of a true crime case, of course.
of course.
Um, and the case file episode that we're looking at today is titled
Ugh.
Case 191, Sheree Beasley, and
Mm.
this episode details the abduction and murder of a 6-year-old girl, Sheree Beasley, in Rosebud, Australia,
Right.
back in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to be focusing on, I guess, kind of the unsung hero of this case,
Okay.
psychotherapist Margaret Hobbs,
Interesting. Yeah.
and her professional relationship with the perpetrator Robert Lowe, which played a pivotal role in his eventual conviction.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic, this sort of
Yeah.
interplay between her expertise and his manipulative nature.
Yeah.
It's like a psychological chess match, really?
Yeah.
And the stakes are incredibly high, just for this young victim.
It's true. So let's actually start with just trying to understand Margaret Hobbs a little bit better.
Oh, hey, yeah.
So she had a background as a parole officer
Interesting.
before becoming a psychotherapist, and she specialized in sex offenders.
Wow.
So we're talking over 20 years working with,
Hmm.
some of the most dangerous minds in Melbourne.
I can't even imagine developing that kind of understanding, not just of criminal behavior, but
Yeah.
of the nuances, the masks they wear, the ways they distort reality
Yeah.
to fit their own narratives,
Right, right.
It's both fascinating and kind of unsettling, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And, we find out that to cope with the intensity of her work, she created this separation between her professional life and her personal life.
Oh, okay, so almost like a...
Yeah, so she would retreat to her home in the Dandenong Ranges each day,
Right.
seeking solace in nature, away from the darkness she encountered in her practice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
It's a way to compartmentalize that constant exposure to the darkest aspects of humanity. It's a burden I don't think many people could bear.
Right. And into this carefully constructed world walks Robert Lowe. Now he's seemingly, at least on the surface, a very average family man,
Okay.
charged with indecent exposure.
Yeah.
And yet, even with this seemingly very minor offense,
Yeah.
Hobbs has this immediate sense of unease about him.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, that intuitive distrust.
Yeah.
Even though outwardly he seems respectable, a church elder, sports coach, devoted husband,
Yeah.
it really suggests she'd honed this ability
Yeah.
to see past the facade to detect these subtle red flags
Yeah,
that
it-
someone else might just miss.
And as their sessions progressed, Lowe's tendency to minimize and deny his actions became glaringly apparent.
Okay.
He'd twist the truth, get caught in contradictions,
Right.
and use technicalities to avoid admitting any guilt.
Yeah, like he was playing a game, testing the boundaries
Yeah.
to see how much he could get away with.
Exactly, and there's this anecdote about a blue car,
Okay.
and he denies owning one,
Mm-hmm.
but admits to driving one.
So it's like this calculated evasiveness.
Right.
Manipulating language to obscure the truth.
And as time goes on, his offenses escalate beyond indecent exposure.
Okay, so what do we see?
Well, we see instances of theft,
Yeah.
and then this really disturbing shift
Okay.
towards attempted child abduction.
And this progression is concerning, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not just the nature of the crimes, it's the boldness,
Yeah.
the targeting of younger victims.
Yeah.
It's almost a classic pattern of escalation that you see in individuals
Yeah.
with these really ingrained deviant desires.
And there's an incident at Flinders Street Station,
Okay.
which seems to be a turning point for Hobbs.
Yeah, what happens there?
Well, he propositioned some young girls,
Oh, wow.
and then when confronted by police, he fled.
So that really solidifies her concerns, I imagine.
Yeah, his actions demonstrate this total disregard
Yeah.
for societal norms and a willingness to engage in very high-risk behavior
Mm-mm.
just to fulfill his urges.
It's at this point that she decides to end their therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
She sees absolutely no genuine remorse from him,
Mhm.
only this manipulative desire to avoid the consequences.
It highlights this immense ethical burden that therapists carry, especially those working with, individuals who are capable of causing harm.
Right.
It's this constant balancing act
Mhm.
between duty of care to your client, but also the potential risk to the community.
And then, just as Hobbs attempts to distance herself from this unsettling case, Sheree Beasley disappears.
Oh, wow. Almost like his presence casts this shadow even after she tried to move on.
Yeah, like a looming threat.
Mm-hmm. The news of Sheree's disappearance, it must have been chilling, just this echo of all her fears.
Almost like all those warning signs were suddenly flashing red.
Yeah, and this time it's not just professional concern, it's this this horrifying sense of foreboding for her.
Right, because think about it. The details of the case,
Yeah.
they line up so closely with his profile, the location.
Right, the victim's age, his own holiday home being nearby.
Exactly. And even though there's no hard evidence at this point, she can't shake this feeling that Lowe is involved.
I mean, that really speaks to her experience, right? Like that deep understanding she had of the criminal mind.
And then, almost like fate orchestrated it, Lowe re-enters her life.
Oh, wow, the timing.
It's unbelievable.
Couldn't be more unsettling.
He comes to her. Again, he's exhibiting some really erratic behavior.
Yeah, and he reveals he drives a blue Toyota Corolla.
I mean,
The exact same type of car.
the same car.
Witnesses saw at the abduction site.
It's like watching one of those, crime thriller movies.
Yeah, where everything starts to click into place.
But you don't want it to click into place.
Right, exactly. It's a puzzle you don't want to solve.
What must have been going through her mind when she heard that detail?
Oh, I can only imagine. It's that conflict between the therapist who wants to believe in their client's potential,
Right.
but also that experienced professional who's recognizing
Yeah.
the growing probability that he's guilty.
And all this is happening while Lowe himself is talking about being questioned by police, his family not being able to provide an alibi, his wife getting suspicious.
God, it's like a layer upon layer of tension and uncertainty.
And then you have the detail about his reaction to the news of Sheree's body being found.
Right.
And you describe it as just unsettling indifference.
It's a classic sign, isn't it? That complete lack of empathy.
Yeah, hallmark of psychopathy. But how does she even continue engaging with him?
I think that speaks to her level of professional commitment.
Yeah.
Most of us we'd find it impossible, but she recognized, she needed to navigate the situation carefully,
Right.
gather information that could help the investigation.
It's like this delicate dance.
Oh, absolutely. A dangerous one, too.
And then, oh my gosh, the incident with the maggots in her office.
Oh, yeah. What was that all about?
What, Case File doesn't explicitly say, but to me, it felt like he was deliberately trying to unsettle her.
Oh, 100%.
Like plant this seed of fear.
Yeah, like a psychological game.
And then he asks this really creepy question.
What was it?
About burying a child in a drain to be eaten by maggots.
Oh, God. It's chilling, almost like he's testing her,
But she doesn't let on. She doesn't react.
She's got nerves of steel.
And instead, she uses a street directory to subtly get information from him about the location where Sheree's body was found.
That's brilliant. It's like she's playing this high-stakes game of chess with a suspected murderer.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Unbelievable.
And finally, after all this, back and forth, Lowe makes a confession to Hobbs.
Oh, wow. So he finally cracks.
He does, but of course there's a catch.
There's always a catch with him, right?
He claims that it was an accident.
Oh, of course he does. Trying to minimize.
Yeah, lessen the
The
consequence.
classic manipulation.
And to prove his story, he suggests a trip to Red Hill,
Wait, chiz.
the place where Sheree's body was discovered.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine?
Well, I just, the emotional strength it must have taken for her to go with him.
I know. It's hard to fathom being in the presence of someone who's just confessed to this horrific crime.
Knowing he's hiding the truth.
And she has to keep her composure the entire time.
Yeah. Can't arouse his suspicion.
All while trying to gather more evidence.
Yeah, it's really a testament to how committed she was to getting justice for Sheree.
Yeah, it is.
And while all of this is happening, Case File takes us back to Sheree's last day.
Yeah.
And it's, she's just running errands, being a 6-year-old kid.
Yeah, such a stark contrast to what was about to happen.
Yeah, it's so tragic. And we also hear from witnesses who saw Sheree with her abductor.
Right.
And it really highlights how quickly things can change.
Yeah, these crucial moments that go by unnoticed.
And then there's the investigation itself.
Yeah.
Initially, the police focused on Sheree's family.
Which is unfortunately pretty common in these cases.
Right. But then the focus shifted to identifying that blue Toyota Corolla.
Right.
And a young boy named Shane, he witnessed the abduction.
Oh, gosh, poor kid.
His testimony becomes key.
Yeah, his description of the car and Sheree's pink bike helmet helped narrow down the suspects.
And then we can't forget about Margaret Hobbs's anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers.
Oh, right, yeah.
That, combined with Lowe's record
Yeah.
and his suspicious behavior, it really made him the prime suspect.
But I'm guessing they still don't have enough.
They lack the physical evidence.
Right, to definitively link him to Sheree.
And this is where the investigation takes a bit of a controversial turn.
Okay, how so?
They decide to secretly record Hobbs's sessions with Lowe.
That's risky.
It is, ethically,
And legally.
but it was a gamble that paid off.
Right.
The recordings were crucial.
They really needed that solid proof.
They did. And then we had the introduction of Peter Reed, a jailhouse informant.
Another layer of complexity there.
Right. Can you trust the word of a convicted murderer?
You have to wonder about his motives.
But in this case, his account, it's corroborated by the recordings from Hobbs's office.
So it's more than just his word.
Exactly. They actually hear Lowe's admissions firsthand.
So the trial begins, and you can just feel the tension, right?
Oh, absolutely. Robert Lowe, this once respected community member, now he's standing accused of this horrific crime.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the pressure on everyone, especially Hobbs.
Right. All those months of her maneuvering.
Gathering evidence, wrestling with those ethical dilemmas.
It all comes down to this.
The courtroom becomes this battleground, truth versus deception.
And the prosecution, they were really meticulous in how they presented their case.
Yeah, they laid it all out.
Lowe's history, his escalating behavior, no alibi, his reactions after Sheree disappeared.
And that confession to Hobbs, of course.
Each piece building on the last. It was damning.
Yeah, but I think the most impactful thing...
What's that?
Had to be those recordings.
Oh, of the therapy sessions.
Yeah, imagine hearing Lowe in his own words.
I know. It must have been chilling for the jury.
His attempts to downplay what he did, you get these glimpses into his mind.
A mind capable of such cruelty.
Exactly. And then you have Peter Reed's testimony, the jailhouse informant.
It's always tricky, relying on the word of another criminal.
Oh, for sure. You always question their motives.
But he actually addresses this in the trial.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He acknowledges his own past, saying he's one of the worst offenders.
Yeah.
But even he was shocked by what Lowe had done.
So he's basically saying, if I'm appalled, it must be truly horrific.
Right, and to back up his claims, he wore a wire while talking to Lowe.
So they weren't just relying on his word.
They heard Lowe's admissions directly from the source.
Wow, that's a game changer.
And those recordings, they completely contradicted Lowe's claims that Sheree's death was an accident.
The investigators played it smart, knowing traditional interrogation wouldn't work with him.
They used his own manipulations against him.
It's brilliant.
But think about Hobbs. She had to testify against her own client.
Yeah, that's got to be tough, breaking that confidentiality.
It's a decision that must have weighed on her immensely.
But she did it because she knew she had...
She was incredibly composed during her testimony.
Yeah, she just laid out the facts.
Let the evidence speak for itself.
And what about the verdict?
Guilty.
Wow.
On both counts.
Abduction and murder.
Imagine the relief in that courtroom for Sheree's mother.
Justice at last.
For the investigators. For Hobbs herself.
It's a victory, hard won, but a victory nonetheless.
It shows what can happen when people refuse to let a case go cold.
But even with the conviction, there are still those lingering questions.
Like the ethical dilemma Hobbs faced.
Breaking that patient confidentiality, it's something that's still debated today in the mental health field.
It brings up those big questions like, where do you draw the line?
When does the need to protect the public outweigh that therapist-client bond?
Sadly, Hines died in a car accident a few years later.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
So she didn't get to see the full impact of her actions.
But her legacy lives on, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The case set a precedent in Australia.
Right, recognizing that sometimes you have a duty to protect innocent lives.
Even if it means breaking confidentiality.
It's a tough balance.
A necessary one, though.
What about Robert Lowe? Where is he now?
Still in prison.
And I'm guessing he's not getting out anytime soon.
Never to be released, his file says.
He still maintains his innocence, though, right?
He does, still clinging to that fabricated story.
It's like a final act of defiance from someone who's shown no remorse.
This whole case, it really shows you that evil can hide anywhere.
It can be lurking beneath the surface in seemingly ordinary lives.
It's a story about manipulation, about the fight for justice.
And about courage, the courage to speak up, to fight for the truth.
To go against the grain, even if it means challenging your own profession.
To protect the innocent, yeah.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive, some really dark aspects of humanity.
But we've also seen the strength of the human spirit.
The resilience.
This conversation doesn't end here, though, folks.
No, we want you to keep thinking about these issues, the unanswered questions.
The lessons we can learn from Sheree's story.
Because sometimes the most valuable insights come from the questions we ask.
Not always the answers we find.
And on that note, we wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.